The first thing I saw through my flashlight beam was the plastic bag. Clear, sealed, sitting dead center on the intake grate like someone had staged it. We weren't supposed to be there. The city map ended at the service hatch, but the hatch had fresh grease on the bolts and the tunnel beyond it was dry, lit by weak overhead bulbs that shouldn't have had power. I knelt on the right, hand hovering over the seal, and felt the air shift as the intake breathed. Inside the bag were ID tags, dozens, scuffed metal rectangles piled together, all the same size, all the same dull gray. No names I recognized, no paper, no sludge, just tags, clean enough to clink. Behind me, my partner's light tightened to a small spot on the bag. The radio hissed once, then went quiet. On my clipboard, the intake box was blank, like it never existed anywhere. In the spring of 1974, our detachment was attached to a security assist job on Cleveland's water system after a series of unexplained pressure drops along the lake intake. Officially, we were there to support city crews, traffic control, perimeter, and confined space entry. Unofficially, the captain said the mayor's office wanted no headlines and asked for soldiers instead of private contractors. We staged before dawn at a maintenance yard near the shoreline, checked gas meters, rope kits, and radios, and reviewed the intake diagrams the city handed over. The drawings showed a straight run, hatch, service corridor, grate chamber, then back out. One page had a blank square labeled only void, which the foreman called an old drafting error. My team was 4 men. I carried the clipboard and the seal kit. We were told to log everything and leave nothing behind. Chain of command was clear. In, verify, out, report.
If you'd like more reports like this, please subscribe.
We entered through the shoreline service hatch at 0540 2x2, with the city foreman staying topside. The ladder dropped into a concrete throat that smelled of wet limestone and old chlorine. My gas meter read clean. O2 normal, no H2S, no LEL. So we moved on headlamps and the weak ceiling fixtures that were already on when we arrived. That alone was wrong. The city diagram showed no powered lighting past the first corridor, and the breaker panel we'd checked outside was tagged out. At the first junction, the map stopped matching reality. The printed plan showed a straight run to the grate chamber. Instead, a curved intake tunnel continued past a maintenance bulkhead that wasn't on the drawing. The bulkhead had tool marks around the frame and fresh gasket compound squeezed from the seam like it had been opened recently. One of my men ran a finger along it and held it up to the light. Not dust, grease. I wrote the time, the compass bearing, and the bulkhead dimensions on my clipboard, then marked the door with a wax pencil. When we swung it open, the air pressure pulled at our sleeves. A steady inhale, then a soft release, like the system was breathing on a timer. 20 yards in, the floor turned to steel grating and the sound of water rose through it. Low, constant, and too close for how dry the tunnel was. The concrete walls were unusually clean, broken only by thin conduit runs that disappeared into the ceiling without any junction boxes or labels. No stenciled numbers, no paint lines, no corrosion streaks you'd expect in a place that handled lake water. The whole space felt maintained, but not by the city crew we'd met above. That's when we saw the bag. It sat on the grating at the center line of the tunnel, squared to the direction of travel as if placed deliberately. Clear plastic, a single tamper seal at the top. Inside, a pile of ID tags, more than a handful, maybe 2 dozen, stacked like someone had dumped them in and pressed the air out. They weren't the thin, bright kind you see new out of supply. These were dull, worn, edges rounded, surfaces scuffed smooth. I couldn't read names at a glance. Only shallow impressions that didn't look like standard stamping. My first thought was training aids or scrap. We stopped at 10 feet and went procedural. My rear man kept overwatch down the tunnel. The second man tightened his flashlight to a small spot on the bag to keep the rest of the space dark. I checked the grating for movement and tested my weight on it. Solid. The intake noise underfoot deepened slightly, like a throat clearing. The radio on my chest crackled once. Just one burst of static. Then the channel went dead. Not weak. Dead. I switched to the alternate frequency we'd used topside. Same result. I could still hear my own squelch click. No return. Bag it and go, the corporal behind me whispered. I didn't touch it yet. I photographed it with the unit camera, 2 frames, and wrote down the seal color and the bag's approximate size. Then I used my pen to flick one corner of the plastic. It didn't slide the way it should on wet metal. It held for a beat and then eased forward as the air pressure shifted again. Inhale, exhale, moving the bag a fraction of an inch as if the tunnel's pulse was guiding it. We advanced another 10 feet to get a better look around it without stepping over. The ceiling lamps above us buzzed softly and dimmed, then returned to the same weak output. My gas meter stayed clean, but my pressure gauge, clipped to my harness for confined space work, twitched with each breath, just enough to notice. That was new. Not enough to slam doors or whistle air, but enough to prove the system was doing something active. We found our first physical marker that the tunnel wasn't city work. A welded plate on the right wall, flush and painted over, with no access screws. It had the shape of a service hatch, but no seam. When my flashlight raked across it, the paint showed faint scrape arcs, like a cover had been rotated and reseated. I tapped it with the butt of my knife. The sound didn't ring hollow. It sounded like striking a full tank. The decision point came fast. If we turned back, we'd have nothing but my notes and 2 photos from a camera we couldn't transmit. If we went forward, we risked losing comms deeper and getting caught if the intake surged. I called it the way you call things underground. Secure the object, establish a line, and keep a clear path out. I pulled an evidence bag from my kit. Thicker plastic, proper seal, tore it open, and slid it forward on the grating. With gloved hands, I lifted the original bag by the top seam, careful not to disturb the closure, and placed it inside the evidence bag without opening it. When the 2 layers of plastic met, the ID tags inside clinked once, a tight metallic sound that carried down the tunnel more than it should have. The overhead lights flickered again, in sync with the pulse under the floor. As I sealed the evidence bag, my rear man hissed for us to freeze. Down the tunnel, past the curve, something moved. Not a figure, not a shadow, just a change in the air. The intake noise dropped out for half a second, as if a valve had snapped shut somewhere below us, and the pressure, breath, became a single hard pull. My ears popped. The evidence bag ballooned slightly in my hands, then flattened again. We didn't run. Running gets you injured on grading and makes mistakes contagious. We backed up by the numbers. 1 man facing rear, 1 man guiding, 1 man carrying evidence, slow and controlled. Behind us, the ceiling lamps stayed on, but the tunnel felt longer with each step, like the curve was stretching away. The wax pencil mark I'd made on the bulkhead came into view at last, and I felt a clean relief, until I saw the mark beside it. A second line, fresher than mine, had been drawn through the same place, as if someone else had marked it after we entered. We reached the bulkhead with my wax mark and the newer line beside it, and for a second I thought we'd found our way out. The handle wouldn't move, not jammed, locked. The latch had seated like a safe door. I tried it twice, controlled, then put my shoulder into it. The steel didn't give. Behind us, the intake noise under the grating thinned until it was almost nothing, and the breathing I'd felt earlier turned into a slow, deliberate pull that tightened my chest straps. The evidence bag in my hands inflated slightly, as if the tunnel were trying to fill it. The plastic went taut. The ID tags inside shifted on their own, sliding into a neat stack against the front face, then rattling in short bursts. 3, pause, 2, pause, 3, like a signal made out of metal. My partner's dog tags, hanging under his blouse, began to vibrate against his sternum. He grabbed them instinctively, eyes wide, and I saw the same panic I felt. Whatever was moving the tags in the bag could see the tags on us. The grating beneath my boots clicked. A rectangular section in front of the bag dropped a half-inch, then rose, then dropped again. Testing. On the third pulse, it opened. Cold air rushed up from below, damp and sharp, carrying the smell of lake water and machine oil. In the gap, I caught a glimpse of a rotating intake screen turning in darkness. Water sheeted across it in a smooth, unnatural layer. Hundreds of tags were caught there, more than we'd bagged, circling and flashing dull gray as they rode the rotation. Then something passed behind the screen. Not a body you could name, just displacement, pressure that made the water flatten and the tags lift as if weightless for an instant. The overhead lights dimmed to a weak emergency glow. My radio hissed with a low tone that wasn't voice, just a sustained note that made my teeth ache. The evidence bag jerked toward the opening. I clamped down with both hands, but the pull was stronger than it should have been for air movement. The zip seal stretched, plastic creased. I heard the tags inside clink hard, one impact, then a rapid cascade, as if they were being arranged. My glove slipped. The bag tore free and snapped downward into the gap, swallowed by the rotating screen below. The grating slammed shut on the next exhale, leaving only the fading rattle under our feet. Behind me, the bulkhead latch clicked. It opened by itself. We didn't speak until we were back in the first corridor where our radios came alive again, all at once with overlapping calls we hadn't heard. I gave our status in plain terms: no casualties, immediate egress, unknown mechanical activity inside the intake run, and ordered the team to keep their hands off their own tags. Everyone had the same faint red line on their throats where the chains had vibrated against skin. Topside, the foreman swore he'd never seen that bulkhead, never mind the tunnel beyond it. He kept repeating that the city intake was straight shot, always has been. When we asked about power, he pointed at the tagged-out breaker and looked genuinely confused. The captain arrived within the hour with 2 men from a water authority office I hadn't seen on the roster. They took my clipboard and the unit camera for processing. No arguments, just receipts, signatures, and a hard reminder that the site fell under federal security assistance. Back at the yard, we stripped gear and ran a basic decon: boots, gloves, sleeves, more out of habit than contamination. The corporal kept flexing his fingers like he could still feel the pull through the plastic. One of my men asked the question none of us wanted to answer. If the bag went down, where did all those tags come from in the first place? That night, the captain told us the intake work was over. The pressure drops had stabilized. We were reassigned before dawn. Officially, the tunnel we entered didn't appear on any city diagram in our packet anymore. Unofficially, every time I closed my eyes, I heard metal clinking in patterns under my boots, like something counting. 2 months later, a sealed evidence bag showed up in the unit supply cage with no chain of custody form and no one's signature on the log. Same thickness of plastic, same style of tamper seal. Inside were ID tags, fewer than before but cleanly stacked, edges aligned like they'd been sorted by a machine. One tag sat on top, face up, as if placed with intent. The name wasn't mine. The serial didn't match any roster we could access. By the time I reported it, the bag was gone. The intake diagram still has a blank square.